Hello, welcome everyone. I'm Melanie from AMAC Active. Thank you for being with us. I want to make sure everyone can hear me okay. If you don't mind in the chat, just tell us where you're from, where you're joining from. I'm in North Texas, Dallas, Fort Worth area. Just want to make sure that you can hear me and that you can see the slides. I'll give you all just a moment or two to do that. Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome, welcome. Let everybody start joining in. Oh, hi, Bob. Neighbor in East Dallas, Colorado, Louisiana, Philadelphia. We are Tennessee, Georgia, all over the United States, New Jersey, Utah, Melbourne, Florida. Love it. I know it's sunny there. Oh, wow. Keep them coming. We are so glad to have you. I wanted to just take a moment and we it's important to us here at AMAC Active to be sharing content with all of you about healthy lifestyle. We are just really thrilled to be able to bring this webinar format. We know that this is a hot topic. We've had a lot of interest in it. In fact, we have about 500 AMAC members who had signed up for this session today. So that is amazing. We are so happy that you're here. So we're going to talk about the new food guide pyramid. We know that it's been reworked, and for all Americans, but for adults over 50 especially, this is a pretty big deal. So in today's session, we're going to break down the new US dietary guidelines. We're going to explain why decades of low fat, high carb dietary advice has failed, and show you how prioritizing protein, healthy fats, and real foods can support energy, weight management, joints, metabolic health as we age. So let's say all that to introduce our guest from Native Path, who has recently come on with us as the sponsor of AMAC Active, our title sponsor, Native Path. So we have our guest, Eli. Are you there? Can you all see Eli's camera? I'm not sure from the view. There he is. Okay, he's on camera. Welcome. Eli McGrain is the Director of Product Development at Native Path. So I'm going to give you a little bit about his background. He's brings over 25 years of experience in nutrition, food science, and product development. He's from the Boston, Massachusetts area. He started his career, really his interest in this field at the age of 14 in the restaurant and food service industry. He really developed a deep passion for that, went into formal culinary training, earned a bachelor's degree in culinary nutrition from Johnson & Wales University, and then he transitioned really into the science of nutrition. He earned his master's in food science and human nutrition from the University of Maine, where he also completed a clinical dietetic internship focused on medical nutrition therapy, and pursued graduate studies at McGill University in human nutrition and molecular nutrition. So he really is our food science superstar expert. We are so glad to have him here. Now in his role, he helps develop products for Native Path. He's been doing product development for many, many years. He's helped launch many hero products that elevate the Native Path brand and drive engagement. We are just so thrilled to have you. Eli, thank you so much for being here. You say hello to everyone for us.
Oh, thank you, Melanie. It's a pleasure. And hello to everybody from all around the country and even some outside it. So it's great to be here.
Where are you joining us from, Eli?
So I'm probably about 60 miles south of Boston. We just got hit with about 3 feet of snow over the last couple of days. So we're hanging in there, but yeah, it's been fun. The kids are having fun. We'll say that.
Yes, I bet. I'm sure I've seen many people who are from the Northeast area and have been in the pathway of those storms too. So we luckily did not run into that down here in Texas. So, all right, to get us kicked off, we've got a poll. I want to hear from you. We've got a series of polls today, but just to get us going, I'm going to put the poll on. I hope that you can see that and easily engage with your answer, but let me push ahead here on the slide. So just let us know which statement best reflects what you've been told for most of your life about nutrition. So a few of the options here: low fat foods are better for heart health. Carbohydrates, the breads, pastas, rices should be the base of most meals. Protein is mainly for bodybuilders, or fats should be limited, especially as we age. So maybe you have something else that you've been taught about food over the years, and you could certainly put that in the chat for us. But we are curious to know, which of these statements have really been kind of the foundation of what you believe to be true about nutrition. I'll give you just a moment or two to complete that. Yeah, I'm seeing the responses come in. So far, it's the low fat is the winner in this category. Low fat foods are better for heart health. I'll give that just another moment so you can answer. And then we will dive into exploring the new food guide pyramid and those changes. So, okay, let me close this one out. So, Eli, it looks like 73% of the folks who answered the poll are saying that it is the low fat foods are better for heart health. That is really aligned with what they've been told all their life. And let's see if we have it. Yeah, more than one would apply for sure. Fat should be limited as we age. Yes. If you have any other thoughts about that, please feel free to put them in the chat. We're going to save some time towards the end of the session for open dialogue Q&A. We want to make sure that we are answering all those questions, but we want this to be very engaging with you. So please give us your thoughts, your comments in the chat as the session is going along. So let's dive into it. Let's change the slide here. So why introduce a new pyramid now? Eli, I'm going to toss this to you. What is the Maha food pyramid? Why introduce it now? And then I have a couple of little points to add after we hear from you.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, this is also this is something I think that's been a long time coming. We know that 70% of Americans are now either considered overweight or obese. 50% of Americans would be classified as having either a pre-diabetic or diabetic, and roughly 90% of Americans have some sort of metabolic dysfunction. And when you look at the root causes of this, it all leads back to lifestyle, and one of the biggest factors of lifestyle is what are we eating. So nearly all of this can kind of be related to the foods that we're eating on a daily basis. And when we think of the USDA and government dietary guidelines, they're these are just things that are published, and we think that we can either disregard them or we can take them to heart. But the fact of the matter is that these guidelines have real meaningful impact for the whole entire country and every American, because they set the stone for what's served in school lunches, what for benefits programs, what the framework is for that, even for the military, like what's necessarily served in a military mess hall. So how the government interprets and then kind of implements nutrition advice and information is really, really, really important and has a big impact. And as we can see up until this point, the government has been coming out with these guidelines, since the 1950s, roughly. However, we continue to get more and more unhealthy. So that kind of tells you that something isn't working. And I think this is definitely a shift in the right direction.
Could not agree more. I just wanted to acknowledge some of the comments in the chat too, that with that last poll, more than one would apply. I agree with that too. But just kind of build on what you said, Eli, just why now? And the proof that we have that our past dietary guidelines have been ineffective and have actually really led to some major problems. Right out of the new food guide pyramid report, which there's a link to that, a QR code in this presentation. So you can download the full report for yourself if you're interested in reading the whole thing. But I pulled from there a little bit more color around the epidemic that we are facing right now in this country. The quote is that the United States is amid a health emergency. Nearly 90% of healthcare spending goes to treating people who have chronic diseases. Many of these illnesses are not genetic destiny. They are the predictable result of the standard American diet, a diet that over time has become reliant on highly processed foods and coupled with a sedentary lifestyle. And the consequences have been devastating. More than 70% of American adults are overweight or obese. Nearly 1 in 3 American adolescents between the ages of 12 and 17 has prediabetes. Diet-driven chronic disease now disqualifies large numbers of young Americans from military service, undermining national readiness and cutting off a historic pathway to opportunity and upward mobility. For decades, federal incentives have promoted low quality, highly processed foods and pharmaceutical intervention instead of prevention. This crisis is the result of poor policy choices, inadequate nutrition research, and a lack of coordination across federal, state, local, and private partners. Whew, so that's a mouthful. But just to illustrate, really that is the reason why we have been faced with consequences that we absolutely can no longer ignore. And this is really this has led to all of these stats and things that are on your screen has led to the development of these new food guide pyramids. I know that this group stays on top of what's happening and the news and the headlines. Not sure if you were aware that yesterday, Dr. Casey Means, President Trump's nominee for Surgeon General, defended her record during and at times kind of testy 2.5 hour confirmation hearing in front of the politically divided United States Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about what she had to say about this chronic disease epidemic in the United States as well. So she said nearly 150 million Americans are on federal healthcare programs, and we spend $50 billion a year on research. Yet outcomes are worsening and disparities are widening. Our nation is angry, exhausted, and hurting from preventable diseases. This public health crisis is touching every American family. It's robbing our children of possibility, our workforce of productivity, and our nation of security. It strains our federal budget and dims hope for millions. We must confront this epidemic through a vision grounded in science, dignity, shared humanity, and a respect for freedom, not politicization and division. Public health leaders must address the evidence-based modifiable drivers of chronic diseases, which include ultra-processed foods, industrial chemical exposure, lack of physical activity, chronic stress, loneliness, and over-medicalization. I've been asked to help our nation get healthy and answer the call of millions, especially mothers who are begging for transparency and support. That is what I'm here to do. So that just is a little bit of a more kind of, background about, how did we get here? What is the problem? I saw in the chat, how can we get the new food guide pyramid? Realfood.gov. Absolutely. That is it. And I do have a link. I'll put a link in the chat, but I do have a QR code that goes straight to that new pyramid and the report that you can download. Okay, so moving forward, let me share with you Secretary Kennedy's quote too about these guidelines. Let's tie it all together. The epidemic that we are facing around health in our country, these new dietary guidelines. He says, these guidelines return us to the basics. American households must prioritize whole, nutrient-dense foods, protein, dairy, vegetables, fruits, healthy fats, and whole grains, and dramatically reduce highly processed foods. This is how we make America healthy again. So Eli, tossing it back to you, what does the new pyramid get right that the old pyramid got wrong? On your screen, you will see this is the 1992 version of the food guide pyramid, the new one on the right that is actually flipped over on its head, really. So tell us a little bit about that. And in the chat, her name, I think you're asking Sherry about the new Surgeon General is Dr. Casey Means is her name. I think that is what you were asking for. So Eli, tell us about the food guide, the old versus the new.
Sure. And as you can see, the new period, it's quite poetic what they did as far as kind of flipping it on its head. So the old food guide pyramid, which was released in the mid 90s, as you can see, the base of the pyramid is grains, right? And also keep in mind that the serving size here is actually really really interesting, in that in the 90s, it was suggested that you should have 6 to 11 servings of grains, and one serving is typically around 20 grams of carbohydrates. So that's what's typically considered a serving of grains, thereabouts. So that's like a very and usually when somebody has a bowl of pasta, they don't have just one serving. It's usually three or four, right? So it's as you can say, though, that's the base, and the kind of the rationale was that you people need energy throughout the day, and carbohydrates are a very good source of energy, which they are. So it kind of this is what makes sense. And then on the next tier, fruit and vegetables, and then on the higher tier, we have, actually, which is interesting, the protein rich and some of the most nutrient dense foods per gram, which is the dairy, milk, yogurt, cheese, and then meat, poultry, eggs, seeds, and nuts. And then finally, on the very, very top, we have fats, oils, and sweets. So really, and it's interesting. You could probably you could have a whole kind of topic about how these recommendations came to be, because it is well known at this point that there was a grain surplus in the U.S. and a lot a lot of this was based on the fact that we needed to kind of offload some of this grain. So the idea was to kind of maybe fold this into the dietary recommendations, right? So not really focusing so much on human health, but rather on just politics and economics of the time. So, but now we move over to the new pyramid, and that you can see it's actually like flipped on its head. And at the base, we now have whole grains. This graphic doesn't put in the actual serving size, but you can find that easily in the at the realfood.gov. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it's roughly like around 2 to 4 servings per day for grains now. So a dramatic reduction. And then while it doesn't do the tiers, because, and I think this is important, because diet is not always so clear cut and dry for everybody, right? You can't just say like you must have this many servings versus somebody else. Everybody's different. Everybody has a different activity. Everybody's in a different stage in their life where they may need a little less or a little more calories. It's so individual, and I like the fact that it's kind of just painting these kind of almost like ideals or broad strokes about what this new pyramid should look like, which is, like we said, whole grains as the base, and then as we move up, we start to kind of increase, fruits and vegetables, and then towards the top, I should say, fruits, kind of in the mid range, and then in the middle we have dairy, some, shellfish, and then at the very, very top we have healthy fats, and then vegetables and fruits. So it's kind of this like gradient of, this is what we should limit, and then this is what we should increase. And then one of the things that's not said in this infographic, but I think is probably the first time that it's ever been said, is that we should eliminate to as much as we can ultra processed food and added sugar, specifically for children. I believe that's like very clearly laid out in the guidelines as well, in the document. And that's the first time. I mean, previous guidelines have talked about reduction of sugar, especially for children, like under 10, I believe. But this is really the first time that we're actually starting to have a conversation about ultra processed food and really focusing on whole real food, which is probably mainly what our grandparents and our great grandparents were consuming. So that's I think the biggest change of the new pyramid.
Yeah, well done. Thank you for that thorough explanation. I'm really just personally very passionate about this topic and nutrition in general. And I've been doing some research into kind of the original history, like going back, like about the food pyramid. And I discovered something that I wanted to share with you. There's a book that came out recently called Food Fix Uncensored. I could put a link to that too before the session is over if you're interested in checking out this book by Dr. Mark Hyman. He is really, he's been practicing medicine for, I think it's over 4 decades at this point. his book shared that if we kind of rewind a second to understand how we got here, the very first guidelines were already based on a set of poor research from the 1960s that blamed fat and exonerated sugar for heart disease. So, a Harvard physician named Mark Hegsted was an author of a 1967 New England Journal of Medicine paper that accused fat but gave sugar a pass for a role in the development of heart disease. And then he went on to head up George McGovern's Senate Commission on the first dietary guidelines for Americans in 1977. You may remember that. Turns out the sugar lobby paid him to write that article, even though the study showed that inflammation, abnormal cholesterol, and other heart disease biomarkers were driven by sugar and starch. So the original guidelines just really evolved for the worse over time, piling on that, low fat bandwagon that folks said that that is what they heard, for most of their life. In
No,
1992, the one that we just showed you advised us to eat 6 to 11 servings of bread, rice, cereal, pasta a day, and to eat fat only sparingly. And so Dr. Hyman says this led us to the worst public health disaster in the history of humankind, driving a global epidemic of obesity and type 2 diabetes. So this is really good news that these guidelines have finally been changed.
no, exactly. And just to add to that, somebody in the chat mentioned about a push from the food industry, specifically cereal, and that is also correct. General Mills was also involved in lobbying for the
Oh,
food guide pyramid back in the 90s as well. So there's a lot of these factors that kind of worked against I think the public interest to kind of push their own agenda, and I feel there's a sense of that we're kind of moving away from that, which is really exciting.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's definitely a step in the right direction and putting the health, the true health of Americans first. Okay, let's move on. Next slide. Let's talk about protein a little bit more. We mentioned that, okay, now we kind of see some different foods sitting at the base of the protein, or excuse me, at the base of the top of the pyramid. Like, what should we be eating the most of? So let's talk a little bit about protein, why it's non-negotiable after, especially after the age of 50.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's great. This is actually one of my favorite topics, just because um, working in the wellness industry for so long, foods, and then even basically what's referred to as a macro molecule, kind of undergo, just fads, right? We just talked about how fat was referred to, like in the 70s, like fat makes you fat, and so you should have sugar. Protein has undergone, an interesting one as well, where it's that I think, there was this kind of preconception that um, protein, having high amounts of protein was only for bodybuilders, right? That we could get by. I think they used to say, just like a small fist size of protein with your meal back with the dietary guidelines from 30, 40 years ago. Whereas now we're knowing that it's been shown that majority of Americans are actually consuming much less protein than they need, right? So, or specifically towards this recommendation, which is the 1.2 to 1.6 gram per kilogram of body weight. An easier way of doing that is just saying 1 gram for 1 pound, right? Roughly, give or take, and that can kind of give you kind of like on the high end, right? So if you're within like 20% of that high number, then that's pretty easy to manage. But especially as we age, it's our body's majority of it is protein. And we know as we age, we start to lose muscle mass, right? That's just an unfortunate, a natural part of aging. Your body, especially if your activities can kind of go up and down, but even if you're living an active lifestyle, you actually need more protein, and then combine that with just age related physiology, you're also in a deficit. So having protein after 50 is incredibly important. So it will prevent muscle loss. It will also kind of support your metabolism. We know protein is very satiating. What that means, it makes you feel full. So if a lot of times in the past, when I've worked with clients that are trying to lose weight, one of the most simple and easy things, because I'm not a big fan of calorie restriction, that's kind of a harder thing to do, but a lot of times it's just replacement, right? So versus saying you can't do something, but like no, you can, but let's just do it in a different way. And usually the best method to do that is protein. So for example, having a meal with protein, we know that we're going to digest it more slowly. It's better for our blood sugar. We actually see that we don't get these blood sugar spikes. So I have in my household, two of my family members are type 1 diabetics. So I see this all the time firsthand. My 12-year-old son, who's a type 1 diabetic, who you can imagine trying to control a 12-year-old's diet is a major, major challenge, right? So, but that being said, we see this every day that if he's actually the school lunches have been the worst thing for him, so we now try to pack his lunch because we can actually see the numbers right there versus if he's having a home brought lunch versus a school lunch, we can actually see those different in blood sugar spikes. Um, so I think this is also one of the biggest pieces of this new food guide moving forward is that protein is being kind of front and center.
Absolutely. Shifting to the next slide here, Eli, I just wanted to share that the full report does have specific guidelines for special populations.
Mhm.
One of those is the guidance that they're sharing tailored to older adults. So I wanted to make sure that we highlighted this. It says some older adults need fewer calories, but still require equal or greater amounts of nutrients, key nutrients such as protein, like you just said, vitamin B12, vitamin D, and calcium. So, to meet those needs, they should prioritize nutrient dense foods such as dairy, meats, seafood, eggs, legumes, and whole plant foods such as vegetables and fruits, whole grains, nuts, and seeds. When dietary intake or absorption is insufficient, fortified foods or supplements may be needed. So I just wanted to make sure that we covered that. But it's very similar guidance. It's not much different from the regular pyramid.
Yeah.
Um, One other change here, going back to that whole fat is bad or fat makes you fat type of mindset, that narrative that we've heard. Talk to us a little bit about the fats specifically, that kind of this change and how there is now a little bit of a different approach to how we view fats.
Yeah. So again, in the past, fat was vilified, right? And in nutrition science, there's really no villains per se, right? It's just kind of what we're told and what's recommended and what. So usually, what I like to think of, I'm a big proponent of what's kind of now coined ancestral wisdom, meaning
Mm,
that
yep.
we've been on the planet now for thousands of years, and it's only within the last 100 years or so that we've started to have these chronic diseases. So like how was our diet kind of evolved up into this point, right? Because if you kind of look 100 years ago, processed foods were non-existent or or there were very very little of them, right? And fat was one of those things. So there were no canola oil or seed oils. There were no margarines, right? So it was either fat that you would cold press, specifically from seeds such as olive oil or avocado, or you would have animal fat, really, and those were really really kind of the main sources. And what I find, especially with this new food guide, is that we are kind of going back to that ancestral wisdom kind of component of where we've come from, and kind of looking at the fat that we've been consuming for hundreds and thousands of years, and also looking at the science and saying, what, that there's nothing wrong with fat. Fat is okay. That being said, yes, if you're consuming way more calories than you need and you're not living an active lifestyle, if you eat too much of anything, you are going to gain weight. That's just physiology. That's how it works. So there is still a need to kind of blend all the elements of a healthy lifestyle, but there's no one nutrient that's bad. If anything, I would say that processed seed oils, such as like canola, soy, those are originally these were developed as industrial kind of byproducts. To be honest with you, right back in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, And we've kind of then thrown that into our food supply because they're easy to scale, they're cheap. But however, we know that they use industrial solvents, and they are very high in omega sixes, which have shown some potential to be inflammatory. So I think there's something to be said for even full animal fats such as butter and beef tallow, full dairy and cheese, and then also just having a whole food natural diet that's well balanced. And I think fats are essential, right? There's no two ways about it. And I think getting people away from the idea of vilifying any one nutrient, I think is really, really important. And the new food guidelines are doing just that as well.
Mm, absolutely agree. Well said. Okay, shifting forward a little bit more on we've touched on carbs. Let's talk about that a little bit more. How does this now we just kind of touch on this about the carbs and ultra processed foods are now being treated very, very differently as well. So can we reframe
Yes.
how we are viewing our carbohydrate
Mhm.
macronutrients?
Yeah, so I'm going to fly a little bit in the face of what I just said as far as vilifying anything, and that is, I do think there is should be the human race would be fine if they never consume
Or
processed
yeah,
food again, right? You know what
yeah.
I mean? We're not losing anything from doing it. Interestingly enough, they've done studies. And what's one thing that, as a food scientist, I've worked in the wellness industry and kind of what we call the better for you space my whole career. That being said, I have colleagues that work for large, what I call global food. I kind of equate it with global pharma. It operates almost exactly the same, to be quite honest with you. I get a lot of insight into how these foods are designed. And the human brain is specifically wired to respond to sugar, fat, and salt in a
Mm,
way and it actually causes a dopamine hit. And I'm sure people have heard of this, almost very similar to what illicit drugs would do, right? In your brain, it lights up the same reward
yeah.
centers. And food scientists know the levers to pull for these different foods to kind of make people consume like a whole bag of chips versus in a sitting versus just
Yep.
a couple. And interestingly enough, if you give people a whole food diet versus a an ultra processed diet, and then just say eat until you're full, consistently they will overeat about 600 calories per day. So
Mm,
as you can see, that's roughly over a week. That's 1 pound of roughly 1 pound of excess fat. So as you can also see, it's very easy to gain weight, right? It's almost in a lot of ways, it's almost not fair. Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
Because as far as what they're doing. So that being said, and carbs are a big part of that because ultra processed food is really built on sugar, which is more or
Mhm.
less carbohydrates. It's a form of carbohydrates, salt, and then, like I said, fat. And they all have different roles. But I think reframing carbs are very important, especially if you're incredibly active. They provide
Mhm.
very, very quick fuel for the body, right? So if you're working out a lot, if you're an endurance and do a lot of endurance, if you're just generally active, if I was in a clinical setting, if somebody was coming to me and I'm very active, I would never restrict carbs. You may want to
Mhm.
restrict the type of carbs they're getting because people have different sensitivities to gluten or to other carbohydrate quality. But I think the main thing with the new pyramid that comes into play is that they're really focusing on whole grains, which is really important because whole grains have fiber. Fiber, we know, is very, very important for the digestion system. And it also kind of does some similar things like protein does when you combine it with a meal, which is um, it's more satiating. It provides it kind of slows your metabolism a little bit. It does all those great things. Also, they're reducing the overall quantity. From the food guide pyramid, 6 to 11 servings was what was recommended. Now we're closer to kind of to 2 to 4. And again, I don't think that's just a general recommendation. It's everybody's going to be a little different. And then the biggest thing is that refined carbs are kind of pushed to the very outside of the
Mm.
diet, and ultra processed is completely discouraged. Which that is just those two things in general is kind of revolutionary for dietary guidelines in this country, coming from the government.
And those 2 changes really have the potential to make a world of difference
Yeah.
as it relates to the health of Americans.
Mhm.
Um
Oh, I just wanted to mention one thing
Oh,
before we go on,
yeah.
'cause I saw a
No,
question in the chat that somebody
yes.
asked, "What is an ultra-processed food?" That is
Mm,
actually a great question because especially we throw this around a lot, and it may be not completely, defined to somebody who's just hearing it. So,
yes.
we think of, like, a processed food, there's different levels, right? So, a process like butter is technically a processed food, right? Do you know what I
Right?
mean? Like, but it's
Mhm.
undergoing very minimal processing. Like you look at butter and just like conventional wisdom, you know what it is, you know kind of where it's coming from, right? So like a something that's almost non-processed would be, like what we see here, like a cucumber or a radish or a carrot, right?
Mhm.
That doesn't undergo any processing, maybe just some washing and some sorting, and that's it. And then even being like strict culinary terms like bread, right? That is actually undergoing processing, right? So, but you can get a nice, high quality kind of like sourdough or baguette that is technically yes, that's a processed food, but in my mind, once you go to like a Wonder Bread, that's what
Yep.
I would call ultra processed, meaning that yes, it is technically classified as bread, but it is so far removed, and the ingredients list is, over a paragraph with all of these things that you can't pronounce. That, in my mind, is what an ultra processed food is.
Absolutely, and friends, this is j I mean, some some people refer to I've heard the ultra-processed foods be referred to as frankenfoods,
Mhm.
like, as in Frankenstein, and yeah, so some of these ultra-processed foods, like, barely even resemble actual food anymore. They've gone
Mhm.
through so many chemical changes, things have been added, taken away, and so, at the end of the day, like your example, Eli, a home, say a homemade sourdough loaf compared to a Wonder Bread, it is, chemically and nutritionally night and day between the
A hun
two. And
100%.
so I hope that helps in terms of the questions. There were actually several about what is an ultra processed food. Let's talk about some of the good news though. So we really with AMAC Active, our whole positioning is really to support people with making better lifestyle choices and that to share that good news that so much of your health is in your hands. And so I want to really drive that point home. If someone were to, begin to follow these guidelines on a, day, we're not perfect, but nobody is, especially with what you're eating on a day-to-day basis. Tell us about the health improvements that we would expect them to see, and especially the ones that they should expect to see first.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm gonna actually start at the bottom, just because there's a lot of evidence to support that diet is actually can be linked to like inflammation, right? And that
Yes.
specifically sugar we know is very pro-inflammatory, and inflammation has kind of these systemic effects on your body, right? And the reason that I'm starting there is because everything leading back up from the list, can be linked towards inflammation in some way, right? If we're in an inflamed state, it is actually more difficult to sleep. Our metabolism is poor. Our blood sugar is going to be in less ideal. There's a lot of things that kind of having this kind of baseline pro-inflammatory state kind of effect. So just having a all food, whole food kind of natural diet with less ultra processed food and less sugar, you're gonna, in my mind, feel better almost immediately. I mean, we've all been there. We've all had a kind of either a luxurious kind of meal, or even just we were in a tight spot and we had to have processed food because there was literally nothing else available. And I have yet to find a person who said that they felt great,
Right.
after something like that, right? So it's kind of the proof is like right there. We do know that also having a whole food diet, like we mentioned, protein, fiber, that's all better for blood sugar control, and also better for energy, right? So, and when we talk about blood sugar control, that kind of leads directly into what we're referring to as like these energy crashes. Because if you can maintain your blood sugar like more at a kind of like level kind of line, then that's you actually do feel more energy versus
Mm.
if you go up have this glucose spike and then you're going to inevitably have a crash because what happens is that once the glucose goes up, your body releases a lot of insulin to compensate.
Mm.
However, it releases so much insulin and that eventually your glucose is going to crash and you're going to feel kind of lethargic. And that's kind of what that is. It's your body kind of overcorrecting or overcompensating for all of that sugar that you just kind of introduced into the system. And similarly, like I said, we talked about cravings as far as satiety. Improved sleep. Sleep is one of those things that everything, from a single alcoholic drink to a diet that's really kind of high in sugar and other kind of pro-inflammatory food components can really affect your sleep. I mean, sleep is one of those things that it's like it can kind of lead back to everything everything, right? We know now blue
Yes.
light, diet, if you saw the sun today, do
Done.
you know what I mean? All of
Yep.
those things kind of affect sleep. And you can make an argument that if you're feeling better, that kind of gives you more kind of mental, what I call like mental bandwidth to kind of make also other good decisions, right? It's really easy
Mhm.
to eat a meal and feel great and then be like, oh, I would love to go for a walk right now versus eating, not feeling great, and just saying like, I would just rather sit in front of the TV and just kind of stay put because I don't feel that great. So it's kind of interesting how these kind of things cascade, right? They call it like habit stacking, right? These
Yes.
one good decision kind of always kind of leads to it's easier for it to lead to another.
Absolutely. Well, that's encouraging too, to, just hear kind of some of those positive benefits that we can be on the lookout for right off the bat. Okay, so what can people do right now? We want to give you a challenge that, wherever you are, we are all very unique and individual, but just kind of we put together a few recommendations on, action steps that you could take this week to improve your overall diet. So you want to walk us through those real quick, Eli?
Yeah, sure. So the very
Mhm.
first one I think is probably one of the ones that's you're going to see like the biggest impact from is that making protein, the star of every meal. Right? So
Mm.
whether or not that's breakfast, lunch, dinner, or even just as a snack in between. Uh, if we were to take and kind of focus on protein, I think that's kind of the easiest and also the highest impact. A change that we can make to anybody's diet. Because we've already we've gone over all of the benefits from satiety to metabolism and everything, right? So I think that is kind of number one. I also think that adding kind of considering what we consume for grains and how we consume them, and this I'll kind of put into cutting sugar and processed snacks because that's all kind of together within kind of carbohydrates.
Mm.
So what are we reaching for when we do want a snack or when we do have kind of some sort of carbohydrate on our plate, right? I think taking a look at that and trying to say, well, I'll focus on whole grains and then I'm going to try to cut sugar and processed snacks out of the diet. One of the things I also wanted to mention is that it's easy to make little changes. It's hard. It's much and to stick to them. It's much harder to make these massive overhauls and stick to them,
Yeah,
just because just
true.
naturally as humans, it's just kind of too much. So I think kind of taking these little baby steps and then kind of one by one, over a week or two, when you feel that it's kind of now more of a habit, then you can kind of make the next small one. I would never advise anybody, kind of from depending on their diet and then just kind of starting from square one. It's just kind of a recipe for frustration. So I just wanted
Agreed.
to kind of throw that out there as well.
Mhm.
And then lastly, add vegetables and healthy fats, right? So I would suggest so if you're somebody who likes to have salad dressing, or even if you make your own, maybe reach for the olive oil
Mm.
or the avocado oil versus
Mhm.
like the vegetable oil.
Vegetable oil.
Yeah, exactly. And then, if you're using margarine, I don't think there's anything wrong with, for like say buttering, your aforementioned piece of sourdough toast. I don't think there's anything wrong with using, full fat dairy such as butter, right? To do that, I think that especially margarine now, like um, they have in the past it had a lot of trans fats, which we know which are really really bad for health. And I think having something that comes that on the label it just says something along the lines of butter. I think
Mhm.
there's more value to that than if you ever read the label of margarine, right? So I think making those kind of like small changes, starting them kind of slow and then increasing them, see how you feel. And then the last thing I would say is that, as far as grains, some people tolerate other grains better than other people,
Mhm.
right? So I know some people that have a very minimal kind of carbohydrate base just because they don't do well with either gluten or other grains, and then there's other people that do fine. So I think it's also there's a very individual, kind of mandate to this where it's not one thing is going to work for everybody.
Absolutely, and I completely agree with you about the making small changes over time approach versus trying to do it all at once. Very good. Okay, roll oh, yeah, I wanted to share this very, very briefly. I wanna make sure we have enough time for the Q&A because 'cause we've got a lot of questions in the chat, but I just really briefly wanted to, address this that the as you mentioned earlier, Eli, these new guidelines do influence things like the SNAP program, school lunches, the military rations, things like that, that programs that touch approximately 1 in 4 Americans. These new guidelines definitely put some pressure on big food and the manufacturers of these ultra processed foods and snacks, sugar drinks, really because federal programs will have to shift purchasing. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how that landscape starts to change. And
Yeah,
and
and just to add to that, a lot of these foods, because they are in these programs that you just mentioned, in the previous food guidelines, they've been subsidized, right?
Yes.
So what I would love to see is now actually maybe subsidizing whole real
Oh,
food
mm,
and rather
yeah.
rather than all this processed stuff.
Absolutely, could not agree more. The book that I mentioned earlier, I'll hold it up and I'll put it in, but this book, Food Fix Uncensored, and I'm halfway through, or almost halfway through, but I recommend it highly because it touches on all those topics: the subsidies, the nutrition research, the connection between big ag. Someone in the comments was talking about glyphosate earlier, some of those different topics, but just kind of interweaving of big food, big ag, big pharma, the lobbying, school lunches, all that. If you're interested in learning more about this topic, that's a good resource for you. So all right, let's see. Let me give you a slide that has, here we go. I know this is not the actual new food guide pyramid. We already saw what it looks like. It's just a little image placeholder there. But if you would like to download the full report, which is a PDF that you can go to the QR code, if you just put your cell phone camera, open it up and put it right over that QR code, it'll take you to that website. Or you could simply type in your browser realfood.gov and you'll end up there, and that's where you can download the full report. So I want to make sure everyone had that resource. So let's shift into some Q&A. So we have a few minutes to tackle that before the end, and don't hop off because we do have a special offer for you at the end for AMAC members. So I want to make sure you hang on to be able to take advantage of that. So let me scroll back through some of these questions. We talked about the ultra processed foods. We had a couple questions about coconut oils. Coconut oil, good or bad? I think this is part of the challenge too, is that there's so much conflicting information out there, or we're hearing that, this food's great. No, don't eat eggs, eat egg. Okay, so clear this up for us. Coconut oil, thumbs up, thumbs down.
Yeah, so like I said, I try to refrain from kind of like giving like a stamp of approval or denial to any one kind of food because it's so context dependent. That being said, coconut oil is a great vegetable based fat with a lot of unique properties because it's basically a vegan source of fat that acts like butter. Right? Do you know what I mean? But
Yes.
it comes from coconuts. So and it has a lot of great properties. It's also very nutrient dense. It does have a lot of saturated fat, which depending on the recommendations or your of your doctor, like if you're somebody who's at very high, have cardiovascular risk, like your doctor may want you to be cognizant of the amount of saturated fat you consume. That being said, coconut oil in of itself, there's nothing wrong with it. I would put that as that's outside of seed oils completely,
Yes.
right? It's a natural cold press fat. It's incredibly healthy. It's delicious. I would much rather work with coconut oil than some sort of hydrogenated vegetable oil,
Mhm.
if I was going to be completely honest.
Absolutely. That's very helpful. And throw your questions in the chat if you got more. I'm just kind of scrolling back and reading aloud some of the ones that I've seen pop through. I did notice there was a question when we were discussing protein, and again, this I would love to get your take on this. Not saying any particular food is all good or all bad, but there were several questions about red meat because that was something that we were told, red meat is bad,
Mhm.
gives you heart disease, causes heart attacks.
Yeah,
Um, give us your thoughts on beef,
beef
red
in general,
meat,
sure.
in general, yes, as
Yeah,
a protein source.
yeah, definitely. I mean, so we know that beef is some of the highest, what we call, there's something referred to as protein quality, right? So
Mm,
no plant protein source so can ever match the protein quality of beef, meaning that per gram or per pound, however you want to slice it or dice it, that the actual the amount of protein you're getting, the quality of the protein, meaning that it has all of the essential amino acids. It also is very, and even outside of that, it's also rich in great good fats like stearic acid, as well as vitamins and minerals like
mm,
protein. Red meat is a very, very high quality food. It's very, very
yes.
nutrient
Mm,
dense. We
mhm.
also know that throughout history, there's been some populations that mainly consume red meat, right? And they don't die of heart disease. Do you know what I mean? Like, so there's for example, the Inuits in the Arctic Circle. They're mainly eating just basically fat and meat. They have some of the longer lifespans, out of any kind of Aboriginal population that's been studied. So what I'm saying, I don't think we can kind of attribute, like, it's not specifically the food that's doing the problem in the case of red meat. I think there's a lot of other confounding factors. That being said, yes, red meat does have saturated fat, and depending on what your cardiovascular health is, there may be some concerns from your doctor about how much saturated fat to consume. That being said, we also know that cardiovascular disease is not just as simple as saturated fat. There's so many other lifestyle factors that contribute to it. We know that there's obviously a genetic component. We know that there's a physical activity component. We're actually now seeing that there's other lifestyle components, everything from things that are just in our environment, right? To also some of the chemicals that have been sprayed on the food, to even some of the stuff that we were talking about earlier, as far as being in a like inflammation, right? Like having a lot of sugar and being in this pro-inflammatory state. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that there are so nutrition isn't complicated, but our environment is complicated. That's kind of how
Totally,
I like
totally.
to phrase it, right?
Mhm,
So I think if we're really focusing on whole real food, first, and staying away from ultra processed food, having a diet that has, like, and I said, everything's in moderation, right? But
mhm.
having a diet that has a moderate amount of red meat consumption, there's nothing wrong with that. And if anything, it's probably beneficial in a lot of ways. That being said, if you were having a ribeye, for 3 meals a day, you probably wouldn't feel great. You know what I mean? So there's
Sounds
always,
wonderful.
yeah,
Just
no,
kidding.
I would probably be okay with it for a little while.
For a
But
little while, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. But what I'm saying is that there needs to be moderation, and there needs to be a balance in almost all aspects of life. And I think nutrition is no different.
Absolutely, absolutely, well said. I hope that helps, for the folks who are asking that, about the red meat. Um, a lot of really great comments. As Valerie says, she's accepting 2 of the 4 challenges this week, and to prevent a sense of deprivation, she's going to substitute the snack sugar removal with the fruits and vegetables addition. Love that. You got this, Valerie. Good luck with that. You're going to do
Oh,
great.
I found a question that I want to answer if you don't
Yep,
mind. So
absolutely.
so this was the second one I heard about protein drinks and protein
Yes,
bars.
me too.
I think
Mhm.
this is a great question just because so and I think it's kind of twofold. I think someone was also mentioning about our protein bars are considered ultra processed, right?
Mm,
And I think yes, some are and some aren't, right? So I think there are protein bars out there that really focus on whole natural foods. I'm not going to plug any one brand, but they're there in the any kind of conventional grocery store and easy enough to see. There's also protein bars that just kind of act as like a surrogate candy bar. Do you know what I mean? But then
right.
they just
Mm,
claim that they have 10 grams of protein. So I think you do have to try to read labels, and I think a good rule of thumb is if you understand the label, then you're good. Do you know what I mean? Also, protein powders and drinks. I think those are great, especially if you struggle to kind of try to meet your protein needs. Not everybody always wants to just have another egg or some more red meat, so to speak. And I think having the option to just have a quick shake is really 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 great. I think it should be a supplement. It's to supplement the diet and
mm.
not necessarily be kind of like the center stage.
Yes, agreed. And a good yeah, a good quality protein powder to fill in the gaps. I hope that helps too for the several of you who are asking about protein powders and bars, drinks. I feel like we need to do a round 2 of this session because we have so many more questions and we're just running up against the clock here. Tell us in the chat, if you don't mind, other if you have continued questions, please put them in there. We do want to have them, but also any other topics that are of interest to you that fall under the AMAC active umbrella, health, wellness, any sort of topics like that. Want to make sure that we give an opportunity to Eli to tell us a little bit about collagen,
Mhm.
specifically the native path collagen. This is a very specific type of protein that really aligns with the new food guide pyramid, but
Mhm.
that we wanted to make sure that you are aware of to help to meet your protein needs. So, Eli, why does collagen matter, especially after 50? What are some of the benefits of this type of protein?
Yeah, so I like to think as collagen as kind of the scaffolding or that kind of holds our body together, right? It's the main component in our tendons, our ligaments. It's part. It's in our bones. And as we know, once we start to hit our early 30s, we actually start to lose collagen, right? Or we don't produce it as effectively, and it's harder to kind of keep up with demand. Um, and it's no surprise that especially once you start to hit your 50s or and even earlier, you start to kind of have like joint, tendon issues, tendonitis, like those kind of things start to kind of crop up. Collagen is also something that traditionally has been in a kind of in our ancestors' diet. That was kind of a foundation, right? Because they were consuming, kind of whole animals, and a lot of that involved either soups or stews or a lot of other things, and that was kind of full of collagen, right?
Mm,
That kind of bone
broths.
broth. Uh,
Yeah.
where that doesn't happen as much anymore. So, in my mind, collagen is kind of a foundational element of our diet, and we see besides being kind of with our bone and our tendons and everything, it's also part of our skin, our hair, our nails, the lining of our stomach. It's a protein that's ubiquitous in function and in form within our body. It's everywhere. I think if I remember correctly, it's over 30% of our body's protein is made up of
Mm,
collagen, which is a really really astounding number when you think about it. So that being said, at Native Path, we one of our main kind of supplement line is collagen because we kind of believe that it's so kind of integral. And we also it's a straight fill product, meaning like when you look at the label, there's no fillers, there's no nothing. It just says collagen. It's grass fed and it's sourced from cows that are pasture raised, no antibiotics. And we only get cows that are of the highest quality in specific areas, like nothing from China. We're working with US, New Zealand,
Mm.
kind of South American livestock that have these very, very high standards. And if I'm also being honest, kind of that last pillar is that we take great pride in the amount of testing that we do. So we test for everything from heavy metals to pesticides to markers of collagen purity. And we do it constantly to ensure and don't rely on what we get from the manufacturer, but do it ourselves through a third party to ensure that what we're getting is of the utmost quality.
And we do have a special discount and offer. I'll show that to you in just a moment. I saw a note in the chat that said, send out a follow-up email that answers all the questions that weren't answered. We may actually need to do that. I was just
Mhm.
thinking like, how we want to answer all these questions. We're running out of time. So we'll either do another session or maybe we will be able to send that out over email. I do want to throw up, if you have time, hang out with us for a moment. I wanted to just get this one last poll, and then I want to give you your special offer from our friends at Native Path, where you can save up to 38% on their collagen. I am a customer of Native Path and I use the collagen every single day. So does my husband. I actually just put the plain collagen in my coffee, and you can't taste it. It doesn't change the taste or anything or the texture. So I'll give you that code in just a moment. But curious from what you've heard so far, just what is your overall takeaway of the new guidelines? Do you support them? Do you think they make more sense? Are you kind of on the fence some parts about it, but still have questions? Maybe you're not sure, or maybe you think the old guidelines are the way to go. So we're just curious before we wrap up here. Sounds like the majority of people are in agreement that the new guidelines make more sense. They're supportive of that. We definitely always want to hear from you and what you think. You can take advantage of the special AMAC offer, and keep in mind, friends, that we are able to bring this sort of educational and informational content to you because of our partnership with Native Path as title sponsor of AMAC Active. We're so grateful for them coming alongside us, and we are so aligned in vision and mission and integrity and quality. So we really thank them for helping us be able to provide sessions like this that are valuable to our members. And we just hope that you'll also in turn support. If you're looking at increasing your protein and you want to get tried on some collagen, or maybe you're using a different brand and want to give Native Path a go, take advantage of the discount that they have offered here. We would love for AMAC to show the support for Native Path. Native Path, we are grateful. Eli, we are grateful for you. We're grateful for all of our members who've taken the time today to learn. We're going to follow up. Expect something from us as a follow-up, either a second session or an email with some more answers. But we are so grateful for the engagement. This is an amazing session. So grateful for your time. And I think we are just really moving in the right direction. Eli, any final thoughts from you?
Oh no, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who attended. I had a blast, and to be honest with you, I could answer your questions all day if time allowed. So I look forward to kind of coming back, engaging again, either on this topic or another one. And also just thank you to you, Melanie, and AMAC for putting this together. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Thanks for everyone who joined. Yes, the session is recorded. We will send out within 24 hours, you'll have an email that has a link to the recording. We do have another one coming up, so we'll be able to talk a little bit more about strength training and staying fit over 50. You will get the recording. Please share it also with your friends and family members, anybody that you think would really benefit from learning a little bit more about the new Food Guide Pyramid. So stay tuned. More to come. Thank you so much. We are so grateful for you. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.